tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday the 30th of October 2024. Voting begins. Postal voting begins for the parliamentary election. Road to Parliament. With just over 2 weeks remaining until the general election, parliamentary candidates make their pledges to the public. Dismissed. Supreme Court dismisses fundamental rights petitions challenging the reduction of the EPF interest rate. Deflation. Sri Lanka's inflation eases further in October.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go. කන්ට පරිස්සම් කරගත්තොත්
අපි පරිස්සම්.
This is Derana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Sri Lanka's premier primetime English news bulletin, Derana First at 9. I'm Tarindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and from around the world. In your top story this evening, postal voting for the 2024 parliamentary election commenced today. Accordingly, employees of district secretariats and officers of the Election Commission and police personnel marked their postal ballots at their respective workplaces. Meanwhile, the second day of postal voting has been scheduled for the 1st of next month.
Sri Lanka decides 2024.
Postal voting for the 2024 parliamentary election commenced today. Accordingly, employees of district secretariats and officers of the Election Commission and police personnel marked their postal ballots at their respective workplaces from 7 a.m. this morning until 4 p.m. A total of 737,902 government employees are eligible to cast postal votes for the general election. Employees of district secretariats and officers of the Election Commission and police personnel who were unable to mark their postal ballots today can do so on the 4th of November. Meanwhile, the 1st and 4th of November have been allocated for Triforce's personnel and employees of all other government institutions to mark their postal ballots. Additionally, postal voters who are unable to mark their ballots on the initial dates can do so on the 7th and 8th of November at the district election office of the district in which their workplace is located.
Horizon Campus 2024 Intake 2. Register now.
Union Assurance.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
President Anura Dissanayake assures state sector salary increments through the first budget proposal following the establishment of a national people's power government. Addressing a rally in Matara, the head of state asserted that since power is being held by the president and a small cabinet of ministers, some political figures are attempting to create instability in society by spreading misinformation about the government.
Another public rally of the National People's Power aimed at the 2024 parliamentary election was held this evening at the Uyanmatha grounds in Matara under the patronage of President Anurakumara Dissanayake.
I would like to make a promise to the citizens of Matara. The salinity barrier in Matara has become a significant obstacle to livelihood. Through the government we form after the general election, we will address the issues related to the salinity barrier and the Nilwala project, transforming these challenges into blessings for us. Historically, famous outlaws from the Matara district have represented parliament. There were times when they controlled Matara through intimidation and fear. From now on, there will be no place for outlaws in our country. Everyone has the right to express themselves freely. They can hold meetings and visit homes without fear. We have secured democracy, but the inability to hold meetings is not a failure of democracy. It is a reflection of their shortcomings. There have been reports of an attack in Arugambe, but we have ensured the safety of the area. It has been just over a month since the presidential election victory, and the power of the government rests with the president and a small cabinet of ministers. Because of this, others are attempting to disturb our stability by undermining our efforts, which is why they are spreading misinformation. Their intention is to create a crisis within society. The former president claims he decided to increase state sector salaries and
allocated funds for this purpose. If that is the case, why didn't he follow through? Universities were closed for 3 months while non-academic staff protested for salary increments. Where was this money during that time? Regardless of the previous administration's actions, under a new NPP government, we will increase salaries through our first budget proposal.
Samagi Jana Balawege leader Sajith Premadasa says his party will grant tax relief to the public and reduce the prices of goods if granted a majority in parliament. Addressing a public meeting, Premadasa asserted that although the incumbent government failed to do so, the SJB will renegotiate Sri Lanka's agreement with the International Monetary Fund. A public meeting of Samagi Jana Balawege aimed at the upcoming general election was held in central Colombo under the patronage of party leader Sajith Premadasa.
මේ මොහොත වන විට රජයට පුළුවන්කම ලැබිලා තිබෙන්නේ තවත් පෝලිං යුගයක් නිර්මාණය කරන්න.
As of now, the government has only succeeded in creating another era of queues. They committed to ending passport queues and resolving the passport issue. But what has transpired since then? The era of queues persists. What is the current retail price of a coconut? What is the price of a kilogram of rice? The government continued to deceive the people of this country. Although the incumbent government failed, I assure you that with a majority in parliament, Samagi Jana Balawege would negotiate with the International Monetary Fund to amend the IMF agreement that the former president entered into. Afterwards, we would definitely grant tax relief to the public and reduce the prices of goods.
Fast track your career from O-Levels with eSoft.
After O-Levels, start your Australian university degree in just 8 months with ACBT's Foundation Program. Enrollments close on 21st October. Call 071 115 1234 for Colombo or 077 011 3223 for Kandy.
Diabetesol, සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
Sarva Janabale leader Dilip Jayavira is of the view that instead of an undisciplined opposition such as those of the past, Sri Lanka requires an opposition that guides the government to fulfill its promises to the people. Jayavira called on Sri Lankans to cast their votes for his alliance in order to establish a powerful opposition that will represent them in parliament. A public meeting of Sarva Janabale was held last evening in the Batepolo area of the Dewlapiti electorate under the patronage of the alliance's leader Dilip Jayavira.
We are contesting this election to establish a strong opposition in the country. This is unique in world politics. We must guide President Anura Dissanayake to grant the public the relief they promised. An undisciplined opposition should not be established in the country. Instead, the country requires an opposition that addresses the issues and who voices the concerns of the people. Therefore, we request the people to vote for us in the upcoming parliamentary election.
And with that, here's a look at more opinions expressed by politicians ahead of the parliamentary election.
Anura Dissanayake was elected to the office of president. Therefore, he should be working towards the country's development rather than levelling criticism at others. Right now, all we see are criticisms. The NPP government is said to have begun to falter. Although Sarva Janabale is only requesting to become the opposition, the people of this country appear willing to grant government power to us.
We assure you that the NPP will only secure a minority of votes during the upcoming parliamentary election. The opposition will obtain a majority and a government will be formed under the leadership of Sajith Premadasa. People are aware that this is only an interim government. We will establish a stable government after the parliamentary election on the 14th of November. Our goal and vision towards the development of this country will come into effect following the parliamentary election. I believe that Anura Dissanayake is not well versed in the governance of a nation. We must abandon the notion that a system change is only possible through a change in office bearers. Queues still exist for passports and they have become even longer. The problem still persists even though the government said they would eliminate the passport queues within a week.
Sri Lanka decides 2024.
Meanwhile, Indian Minister of External Affairs Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar commented on how India stepped forward to support Sri Lanka when the island nation was engulfed in a crisis in 2022. He made these comments while addressing a discussion organised by the Flame University in India.
I think today this country has the ability to compete. We have shown that. And you spoke about Maldives. You should look at Sri Lanka. That in Sri Lanka today, every Sri Lankan knows. Even people who historically were critical of India, today they will come and tell you that, look, we know one thing, that when the entire world threw up its hands and, they were literally running out of food, they were running out of electricity because it was fired up by oil. They were in such dire straits. Everybody knows that who came forward.
During a recent meeting between government officials from the fisheries sectors of India and Sri Lanka, Indian representatives urged Sri Lanka to expedite the release of Indian fishermen and their vessels currently held in Sri Lankan custody. The discussion took place yesterday during the 6th officer-level meeting of the Joint Working Group on Fisheries between India and Sri Lanka. During the meeting, the Sri Lankan delegation highlighted concerns regarding damage to marine environments in Sri Lankan waters. The 6th officer-level meeting of the Joint Working Group on Fisheries between India and Sri Lanka was convened in Colombo yesterday. The main objective of the working group is to prevent illegal fishing activities by Indian vessels in Sri Lankan waters, particularly in the northern and eastern regions of Sri Lanka. During the meeting, the Indian delegation, while urging the Sri Lankan government to expedite the release of detained Indian fishermen, noted the increase in detentions of Indian fishermen and their vessels in Sri Lankan custody. They also highlighted the imposition of long sentences and substantial fines. Sri Lankan officials reiterated the considerable damage inflicted on marine resources by Indian fishing vessels using mechanical bottom trawling within Sri Lankan waters. They also requested prompt action from the Indian government to facilitate safe passage through Indian waters for Sri Lankan multi-day fishing vessels travelling to and from the Arabian Sea. Both parties agreed to prioritise addressing the various challenges faced by fishermen of both nations in a humanitarian manner, as these concerns directly affect livelihoods. Discussions also covered strengthening joint patrolling by law enforcement authorities from both countries to prevent Indian vessels from entering Sri Lankan waters, as well as the maintenance of a hotline between the coast guards of both nations. Additional topics included the progress of investigations into the deaths of Indian fishermen in Sri Lankan waters and the potential for joint research initiatives in the fisheries sector by research institutes in both countries. Pivituru Helaurume leader Uday Gamampila says that while the government provided reasons for rejecting the special committee report chaired by retired Judge A.N.J. D. Alvis, no reasons were given for rejecting the report issued by the committee led by retired Supreme Court Justice S.I. Imam. In response to Minister Vijitha Herath's rejection of the President's Special Committee reports on the Easter Sunday terror attacks, Gamampila further remarked that it appears the government may be attempting to protect Mohammed Ibrahim, who is suspected of involvement in the attack.
ආණ්ඩුවේ මාධ්‍ය ප්‍රකාශක විජිත හේරත් මැතිතුමන් අල්විස් කමිටු වාර්තාව ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කළ ආකාරයටම
Government media spokesperson Minister Vijitha Herath has dismissed the Imam report, much like the earlier rejection of the Alvis report. When rejecting the Alvis report, he at least provided some reasoning, stating that the report was unacceptable due to alleged malpractice by the committee chair. I challenge him to provide evidence proving that the chairperson had indeed been found guilty of these accusations, but his silence on the matter implied it was a lie. However, in rejecting the Imam report, no reasons were given by Minister Herath. If the government suspects these reports aim to protect certain individuals or serve political purposes, they should seek redress in the Court of Appeal rather than holding media briefings. What is the government's motive in appointing Ravi Senaratne and Shani Abesekara to lead this investigation? It appears they may be seeking to protect their political allies, an individual whom both Ravi Senaratne and Shani Abesekara once indicated was suspected of the involvement in the attacks, specifically Mohammed Ibrahim. If this is the case, it suggests the government has a vested interest in placing these officials in charge of the investigation. Furthermore, Minister Herath has falsely claimed that the government has not incurred any new loans. However, under President Andrew Dissanayaka's leadership, the government has taken loans totaling 958.75 billion rupees per month through the issuance of treasury bills and bonds. This borrowing has, within the last month alone, added an additional debt of 43,600 rupees per citizen. Minister Herath also asserted that the government has not printed money. Yet, according to the central bank, while they did not finance the government's budget directly, they did print money to purchase foreign currency and maintain liquidity and stability in the financial market.
මූල්‍ය වෙළඳ පොලේ ද්‍රවශීලත්වය සහ ස්ථාවරත්වය රැක ගැනීමටත් අපි මුදල් අච්චු ගැහුවා කියලා. බරපතල පරතරයක්. ඇයි? එතුමාලා කරන්න බැරි දේවල් කිව්වොත්.
Yes, a significant contradiction exists. The government did not expect to be granted such power by the public, which may explain these discrepancies. To express the public's disappointment in President's misuse of law, we intend to launch a public petition.
කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
The Supreme Court dismissed 4 petitions filed seeking a ruling that the previous government's decision to reduce the interest paid for the investments of the Employees' Provident Fund in Treasury bills and bonds to 9% under the domestic debt restructuring process was a violation of fundamental rights. The order was issued today by the Supreme Court after accepting the preliminary objections raised by several parties, including the Attorney General, that the relevant petitions cannot be maintained since fundamental rights petitions filed pertaining to the same matter have been dismissed earlier without being taken into consideration. The 4 petitions were filed by several parties, including the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone Workers' Union. Meanwhile, former Minister Johnston Fernando, who was arrested and remanded over the unregistered luxury vehicle allegedly belonging to him, found parked at a hotel in Colombo, was granted bail today. He was ordered to be released on 5 surety bails of 5 million rupees each by the Colombo Fort Magistrates Court. Former Minister Johnston Fernando, who was arrested by the CID on the 23rd of this month, was remanded until today by the Colombo Fort Magistrate. The former MP was arrested after he had arrived at the CID to provide a statement regarding the unregistered vehicle allegedly belonging to him. Meanwhile, 2 suspects surrendered to the CID in connection with the same incident yesterday and were subsequently arrested and produced before court. The duo were ordered to be released on 2 surety bails of 500,000 rupees each after being produced before the Colombo Fort Magistrates Court. Welcome back. The Sri Lankan High Commissioner in Bangladesh, Dharmapala Virakodi, emphasised the need to expedite negotiations for the preferential trade agreement during a meeting with Bangladesh's Foreign Secretary, Mohammad Jashim Uddin. During yesterday's meeting, Foreign Secretary Uddin outlined the reform initiatives and priorities of the interim government aimed at ensuring free, fair and participatory elections. Both the Foreign Secretary and the High Commissioner underscored the importance of holding Foreign Office consultations between the 2 nations to discuss bilateral relations. High Commissioner Virakodi stated that Sri Lanka would propose dates for the next Foreign Office consultations after the parliamentary elections. Additionally, both parties stressed the importance of finalising agreements on coastal shipping, avoidance of double taxation and mutual administrative assistance in customs matters. Sri Lanka's inflation has decreased to negative 0.8% in October, down from negative 0.5% in the previous month. The Department of Census and Statistics attributed the decline in inflation primarily to price decreases in the non-food categories. The year-on-year food inflation, as measured by the Colombo Consumer Price Index, increased to 1% in October from negative 0.3% in September. Meanwhile, non-food inflation decreased to negative 1.6% from negative 0.5%. For October 2024, on a year-on-year basis, the contribution to inflation from food commodities was 0.33%, while the contribution from non-food items was negative 1.1%. The decrease in non-food inflation was mainly due to price drops in categories such as housing, water, electricity, LP gas and other fuels. However, price increases were observed in alcoholic beverages, tobacco and narcotics, education and health. The Colombo Bourse closed in positive territory today with market turnover crossing 7 billion rupees. The broader all share price index closed 0.20% higher at 12,770.58 points, while the more liquid S&P SL 20 closed 0.22% higher at 3,864.32 points. The banking sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while a crossing on Harish Chandra Mills contributed over $1 billion. Foreign investors closed as net sellers, offloading shares worth 265.3 million rupees. Up next, we have senior analyst of Capital Alliance, Imran Dean, with some thoughts on the current status of the economy in our next segment, Economic Outlook.
The weekly average prime lending rate increased by 7 basis points to 9.17%, while the call money rate fell marginally to 8.57%. Reserve money fell and market liquidity showed a surplus of 86.3 billion rupees. On October 25th, the all-share price index jumped 1.66% to 12,517 points, while the S&P SL 20 increased 3.76% to 3,759 points. T-bills and T-bond rates remain unchanged, with a 2.3 times oversubscription at auction and a 21.4% increase in secondary market transactions. The Sri Lankan rupee has risen by 10.3% against the US dollar this year.
With that, let's take a look at the rupee exchange rate for the day. Now let's take a look at corporate news in brief. ISF Industries, a Sri Lankan end-to-end engineering solution provider for coconut and dairy processing industries, entered into a memorandum of understanding with PT Natural Indo Coconut Organic, Indonesia's leading coconut product manufacturer. This partnership is expected to pave the way for ISF Industries to solidify its presence in the Southeast Asian region and capture new markets. The agreement was signed on the 7th of October this year at the Indonesia South and Central Asia Business Forum in Jakarta, Indonesia. In the meantime, Pan Asia Banking Corporation PLC reported a pre-tax profit of 3.22 billion rupees for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2024, a 52% increase compared to the corresponding period last year. The bank's profit after tax was 2.22 billion rupees, which is a 78% increase compared to the corresponding period last year. In addition, the bank's total assets saw an increase of 8%, mainly driven by loans and advances and financial assets measured at fair value through other comprehensive income. In other corporate news, EB Creasy & Company PLC announced the acquisition of 18,995 ordinary shares at 23 rupees and 90 cents each by director and shareholder of Oakley Investments Private Limited, SDR Arut Pragasam, and director of Oakley Investments Private Limited, Sanjeev Rajaratnam. The company disclosure added that the relevant transaction occurred on the 25th of this month and was notified to the board of directors on the 28th. Welcome back. Sri Lanka's Sumati Dharmawardena has been appointed as the new independent chair of the International Cricket Council's Anti-Corruption Unit. The appointment follows the withdrawal of Sir Ronnie Flanagan, who retired from the role after 14 years of service. Dharmawardena, who served as an additional Solicitor General at the Attorney General's Department, represented the Government of Sri Lanka, including the Ministry of Sports, in a variety of legal matters. And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining and have a good night.